Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where in the world you are. Welcome to our coffee chat. All you need to do is actually sit back and relax, enjoy your coffee, and obviously this webinar. I'd like to give a very short introduction as we have a very full agenda today. So, first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Vincent van der Belt. I'm responsible for Cubix operations here in Hong Kong and China, and also for third-party channels across the globe. For a few people who may not know Cubix, Cubix is an international talent assessment consultancy, and we are supporting companies with their selection and development processes through our personalized solutions that can consist of any combination of online tools, consultancy, and services. So Cubix has recently been acquired by PSI, a US headquartered global leader in workforce solutions. And you've probably noticed that we've gone now by the name of Cubix, a PSI business. And in the future, this will be shortened to PSI. So today's webinar is all about campus recruitment, and we have 4 panelists to share their experience from a different perspective. In advance of the webinar, we have sent them a couple of questions so that we could collect their input and share some of the key points on slides with you today. For your information, today during the webinar, we're just going to pretend it's a normal world. And this webinar will last around 45 minutes, and we will be recording this session to make it available for those people who cannot join this morning or this afternoon. We have put you all on mute to avoid any background noise, but please feel free to add your questions via chat box. We will keep the questions for the end of the session, and if we have time to answer them, we will definitely get straight back to you. Should we run out of time, and we have quite a full agenda, so it's not completely unexpected, but if we are running out of time, we will follow up with you individually after the webinar. So let's start. Our first speaker today is Peter Finch. After leaving his position as Director Greater China at SHL, Peter started his own consultancy, Graduates, focusing on graduate selections in Hong Kong and China in 2019, and this Graduates was acquired by Cubix in 2016. Peter semi-retired from the business in December last year. So Peter, I'd like to say welcome back. And thank you for spending some of your free time with us today. Peter, we would like to jump straight in and like to know from you what changes in graduate recruitment in Greater China you have observed for the last 10 years or so.
Well, I would say without doubt, it's the degree of sophistication in the way that assessment is used in graduate hiring. It's gone from being used fairly crudely as a sifting technique, largely to reduce numbers, to being used in a more strategic manner to match graduates to jobs or even to departments, used to recruit for future needs. So that's a very current trend, actually recruiting not for today, but for the future. So things like digital dexterity and learning agility are becoming increasingly important in what we assess. A decade ago, anything more than numerical and verbal reasoning was seen as contributing little. So as I said earlier, it was just about sifting out the less able candidates to give us manageable numbers. Whereas today, assessment's role is to find candidates that are right for your organization. And that means understanding the organizational needs, the strategic direction, the culture, the values, etc. And working with organizational psychologists to apply assessment most appropriately and to ensure the outputs are aligned with what the organization needs now and in the future.
Okay, so definitely some quite structural changes in the past 10 years, but there are probably also some elements that have not changed over these past 10 years.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I think the role of cognitive ability in graduate assessment has not changed, or at least the importance of cognitive ability has not changed. I think we probably can all agree that intelligence per se is not the differentiator between your average candidate and your high performer. So why should we include it in a graduate assessment program? Well, there have been attempts to drop it. One of the world's largest professional services companies proudly declared a few years back that we will no longer be including cognitive testing in our graduate assessment. The problem was that leaving out cognitive ability led to a less robust selection process. They ended up doing less well in recruiting candidates that would go on to perform well. And sure enough, the next year, cognitive ability was back in the selection process. The issue here is that recruiters often think cognitive ability is the same as intelligence, and it's not. There's a link between them, but aptitude tests they're not IQ tests. They assess a candidate's ability to reason with data. And that was, has and always will be a critical parameter as an indicator of future performance. Particularly so when our graduates have little or no work experience for us or them to reflect upon.
Okay, so we've already talked about the changes in the last 10 years, but what's your view on the newest trends in graduate selection?
Okay, well, there have been a lot and some wonderful advances in assessment in the past few years, both from the applied psychology side and the deployment of new technologies. Great applications of technology for online interviewing, to chatbots, to engage candidates at application, to gamification. On the applied psychology side, we see great work in understanding how behavioral competency impacts on an organization's business aims. And we see examples now of graduate assessment protocols which are very precisely targeting unique needs of organizations. And we also see what I refer to as triangulated assessment, assessment with three sides. So the cognitive ability that I mentioned earlier, behavioral competency, and culture or values fit. So great advances there on the psychology side. With the application of new technology, I think that our sector, HR, we are early adopters, and that's admirable. However, it can sometimes be dangerous when it's simply driven by the need to sort of ride on the latest buzzword. I mentioned gamification, and I feel this is what's happened with gamification. We all started believing that we had to deliver a gaming solution. Worse still, we all believed that this is what the graduates wanted and would find engaging and impressive. So we started to see assessments delivered in a gaming environment, but it was neither what the candidate wanted and nor were the games impressive. I mean, certainly not to a 22-year-old who was hooked on Call of Duty. So what was happening was we were seeing gamification as the objective, and it wasn't the objective. Gamification was just a tool, but it was being promoted and adopted as an endpoint in itself. But the endpoint was candidate engagement and immersion. So both Cubics and SHL, we both conducted graduate surveys, and I'm glad to say we both reached the same conclusions. Gaming is at the bottom of what is important to graduates. At the top, it's a fair and transparent process. That's what graduates want most, a fair and transparent process, followed by feedback. And also, somewhere up the top, there was gaining insights into what it was like to work with the organization they were applying to. So, if you want to attract and impress candidates, then put your focus there, not in gamification. I think now that new technology is being used more maturely to make the process more engaging, to make it more immersive, to give feedback, to show a corporation's culture and values. So as I say, it's being applied in a more mature way, and I think other panelists will be saying more on that later. But there are other buzzwords around new technology at the moment. So I want to say something about the impact of big data. Certainly our science will be revolutionized by big data. It's already started. There are a few startup companies in this field, and they assess memory trails, reaction times, cohesive thought, these sort of things, and correlate this through big data to parameters like leadership potential. However, you may have noticed that the serious players in the assessment market, like Cubics, SHL, Saville, Korn Ferry, we're all taking a rather more cautious approach to this type of data science and not yet pushing these data-led solutions. And the reason is very simple. It's the validity is unproven. Psychometrics to us has always been governed and ruled by validity, which is the proven ability of an assessment to predict future performance. And we've got some way to go yet on these correlations. We've got an issue at the moment. We've got an issue between correlation and causation. We can find correlation, but we don't yet know that this correlation is the cause of what we're trying to assess. So, I'm not poo-pooing this at all. Absolutely the reverse. I think big data is the future, but it's got a little way to go yet before it can be applied successfully.
All right. Peter, I actually have 2 questions remaining, but we allowed every panelist 10 minutes of time. So I have 2 more questions, and could you give a very short, concise answer to them, please? So can you just say, do you feel that all companies currently are doing the same, and can they differentiate? I know it's very challenging to give a short answer to that.
Okay, all right, well, a short answer. A lot are doing the same. Those that treat assessment as a commodity, buying something off the shelf, the same shelf that other organizations are buying off, then of course they're not going to differentiate themselves. But those that take a more holistic approach to it and work with the vendors to provide something that is more reflective of their organization can very, very clearly differentiate themselves. So they can reflect in the assessment process, what it's like to work for an organization, how their values, how their personal values match with the organization's values. And they can use all these things to differentiate themselves very, very clearly. The whole platform can look completely different with each organization. So absolutely, yes, you can differentiate yourself through assessment.
Okay. I'm going to ask you one last question, which is actually the question, what question have you been asked, you think, the most oftentimes? So actually, what are the top concerns from recruiters in Hong Kong and China when they consider online recruitment?
I think it's the same throughout my decades of work here, and it's always, can an online test, can a questionnaire really identify high potential candidates? That's the question, and my answer is no. You're probably expecting me to say, of course, the answer is yes. No, the answer is no. Online assessment can help you identify the high potential candidates. More than that, it will radically improve your chances of getting candidates on board who are going to make useful, valuable contributions to the future performance of your organization. So, it gives you the objective data with which you can probe further to significantly aid your decision making in getting the right candidates into your organization. But it won't make the decision for you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Peter, for your contribution for today. Maybe we can get back to you at the end of the webinar for some questions, if time allows. I would like to introduce to you the second speaker of this afternoon, which is Anthony So. Anthony, welcome to our webinar. We have experienced that companies are not only faced with the challenge of identifying the best candidates amongst many, but also looking for the best possible way to actually get in touch with them, to reach out to them, to engage with them. And we're very happy for you to join this webinar, because you're going to provide us with some idea on how you and your company are supporting other companies with this. So can I ask you to first give a brief introduction of yourself and your company?
Okay, sure. Hello everyone, I'm Anthony. So one of the co-founders of my startup company called OnGrad. So we are actually an employer partner for employers, campus employer branding campaigns, as well as recruitment innovation campaigns. So basically we start from having our very own Facebook page, sharing information about how to prepare for grad jobs and interviews for students. But accidentally we accumulated a pool of followers. So we now have more than like 20,000 followers across different channels. And most of the time we work with different corporates with their campus recruitment campaigns and their employer engagement campaigns, say FMCG firms, banks, iBanks, and property conglomerates. And we also recently launched an app called On My Grad, which is an AI-backed career learning platform for universities. So you can imagine it as a career e-learning platform, as well as a job marketplace.
Is there anything else you wanted to say on these slides where it talks about the AI career prediction, etc., where you show your mobile phone screenshots?
Yeah, that is our app. So we have, as Peter has mentioned, the AI machine learning is not that ready for predicting exactly students' career readiness, but on the other hand, it is quite helpful in helping students to realize how far they are when they're compared to present status and their ideal jobs. So we make use of the machine learning technology. We help to identify students' career needs, and we recommend them with different opportunities, online, offline. So we make use of machine learning to help students prepare for grad jobs.
All right. Thank you. Can you tell me, and we move on to the next question, what does according to you, your company, what does the next generation want? What are they looking for when they are in the campus recruitment process?
Yeah, sure. So I have to be very frank, nowadays the new gen are really picky. So they really want to have an access to know more about the company as well as the industry before they have made the application decisions. As revealed by different surveys and research and reports, nowadays students really treasure, they really put the career interests, the corporate values, as well as the corporate culture with a higher priority than the compensation packages, and they are choosing.
How did you get this feedback? Did you get from new generation, or where does this show that this is the main interest of them?
Actually, it is revealed on different, readily report on, I say, from LinkedIn report on new gen, how they choose their, ideal employers, as well as, Universum, they have their, report. So these are very treasured, the major criteria when they choose their ideal grad jobs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is more of interest than the compensations and the packages, although I don't think that will be left out in their consideration.
Yeah, I guess. But of course, these are with just higher priority. And of course, if the company have better offerings and better culture, it will be still very attractive to them.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess that some of the people are quite keen to know, to learn from you, what kind of tips you have to actually attract and engage this new generation at their campus recruitment.
To echo with what I have just mentioned, I think for the very first thing should be transparent on position details on how to hack for the job, prepare for the interview, how will be the recruitment process, and if there are any updates on the recruitment process, that will be very essential to retain them in the recruitment funnel. And the second tip will be fair and objective, because nowadays, all the information are really accessible online. So they will compare with each other whether they can get, the next round assessment invitation, something like that. So they will wish to have a fair chance that to be tested. So that's very important. If an employer can, for the very first assessment, they can give them with a chance to be tested, they will feel, the sense of respect. So they will, in return, they will have a mutual respect, between the candidates as well as the company. And then the final tip will be online and convenient, and that will be very straightforward because, candidates nowadays are really tech savvy. So they really wish to see if, the assessment can be done online and especially on mobile phone.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So, of course, this is maybe easier said than done. Perhaps you also have some advice how these tips actually can be built into the recruitment process.
Yes. So I would say the very first thing should be building up a pipeline or building up a talent pool before and after the recruitment journey, because before that they are your potential candidates, and after that they are maybe your potential candidates in future. So I guess it's very important to letting them know more about the company's updates and as well as job updates, and they will be kept into your talent pool. And the second thing should be, of course, very directly make use of online platform and tests, and there will be most straightforward and most engaging way to get in touch with candidates. And the third thing will be about to build up different procedures in your recruitment process, but with a mindset on building better candidate experience, because nowadays everything is about experience, no matter customer experience as well as candidate experience. So I would really suggest that if company can adopt these three solutions into their recruitment process, that would be great. The first one will be some kind of pre-program before internship and graduate positions. Some may argue that internship is already a very pre-graduate programs already, but as we can see from the market, there are some more other pre-internship program available in the market, and I will share it more in the next slide. And the second solution will be CRM, not just client relationship management as well as candidate relationship management. Something like sending them EDMs about company's update. And I even heard about a case that a company organized a volunteer team that includes members within the company as well as outside company. And those members outside the company were their alumni as well as fellow candidates. So that would be interesting if the companies can still engage them, on online and offline. And the last thing would be about how to make good use of alternative engagement, especially under the COVID-19 situation.
Interesting to maybe, but the last point, to have another conversation with Peter Finch with regards to the game-based assessments. For anything you would like to illustrate with regards to the real-life examples?
Yes, I would like to highlight more about the alternative engagement opportunities under the COVID-19 situation, which will be shown in the next slide. And
okay.
Yeah, and I would say, online webinar like this or employer showcase online will be a great alternative, or I can only say it will be the only alternative right now. But then the content can be more engaging and innovative instead of one-way presentation. Something like a mock video interview, because nowadays you will expect candidates will be so familiar with online interviewing tools or webinar tools, but actually they are not. So if the company can organize some mock video interview, they will highly appreciate that. And of course, industry knowledge workshop and insight day can be put online also. But most importantly, and recently we have launched a virtual internship ourselves, and I would say it may be something very interesting under COVID-19 situation. Virtual internship is not something completely new, but then the content can be more creative. Say we put everything online, not just creating a online workspace for them, but then we require them to report to us weekly, as well as we gave them many online engagement workshops and activities. So that may be a more engaging way to conduct internship online.
Okay, so you have done this virtual internship within your own company, right?
Yeah.
Have you tried that? Okay, so if people like to hear some more about that in terms of what exactly that could consist of, you have some real life experience.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, well, I think these tips, especially in the world we're living in, we're not going to talk about it today, but we'll touch on it. There's no escape, are probably very useful. So Anthony, thanks a lot for sharing. We have to move on to the next speaker of today. Thank you, Anthony. The next person we've got in our panel for today is James Lewis. He has a background in occupational psychology and joined Cubics about 7 years ago after he has been working with 2 other consulting firms. Currently, he's principal consultant in the UK team, and we have invited him to share his perspective on the current trends in graduate recruitment in the UK market. So James, thanks for joining us. Let's get straight to the topic, and please share with us your observations of the current trends in the UK market.
Yes, all right, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody. So this on the left-hand side of this slide is just a bit about myself. So chartered occupational psychologist. I've been at Cubics PSI for about 7 years now. And then there, just a list of kind of trying to get across the breadth of the types of entry-level projects that I've been directly leading on across various sectors, industries, and mainly graduate trainee, but other entry-level solutions as well. So that's just a bit of centralizing that side. And then, yeah, Vincent, if you click the next sort of action on the slide, it will bring up the trends. And these were the ones that I wanted to talk about fairly quickly today. I seem to have picked fairly big topics to get through in 10 minutes, so got a bit carried away there, but I'll do my best and we'll work it through. But the real power of analysis, and that's linking to the points that Peter mentioned earlier about big data and what that really practically means that I'm seeing in the UK and how we're actually starting to make progress there. One of the biggest topics that I've seen over the last few years, but really coming to fruition now, is the expanding of diversity and really taking diversity seriously. And then the digital experience, which everyone's talked about, and I'll put my own spin on it towards the end. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's great. Yeah, indeed, we can share about 3 webinars, I think, about these topics. So maybe for the future. For now, I know you have created some very structured and insightful slides to dive into more detail with regards to these topics. So I'm going to suggest that you are just taking us through some of the key points, and just hint at me when you want to move to the next slide.
Sounds good. Yeah. I got a bit carried away, but let's go through it, and I'll pull out the main points. So yeah. So the first trend, as it were, is about analysis, like I mentioned, and how it's really helping us learn and adapt. So the main trends that I'm seeing with the clients that I'm working with across the UK are the sort of getting set up to manage data, basically. So what are the key job metrics that really define performance and success in your business? For individual roles, and then at team level and at strategic level, really get clear. And it doesn't have to be a million data points. It can be very focused. And then it's about building the infrastructure. So what software, what policies do you need in place to start collecting that data in an effective, efficient, in a meaningful way? And then thirdly, where we really come in is to help establish much more analysis phases than I think we've ever done before. So actually, validation used to be looked at as something that may happen annually. We're actually doing it 3 or 4 or 5 times a year now through graduate campaigns to really build in a cycle of learning and insight. So this is all stemming from the challenge that big data, it's got so many opportunities, but also it can be quite overwhelming. I found it quite overwhelming. What data is important? How do you access it? How do you make sure it's secure and anonymized? But also, I think as Peter mentioned, there's inherent limitations with some data. So they, particularly when they're based on human judgment, we know that we have to take some caveats there with data. So there are limitations, there are challenges here within this trend, but our vision is becoming clearer and clearer with data, I think, in the UK. So I really would encourage people to think as analysis as really one of the key critical long-term goals for any campaign that you're working on. So where data is actually, really you can genuinely believe that you're becoming data-led, where you're sharpening your predictive models and evolving assessments based on quite frequent analysis. This will help you bridge the gap, which I still think exists between selection and development. So really linking through to development programs to help create a loop back really to assessment so that you can sharpen criteria. And then ultimately, this is the thing that everybody wants, but I think this is the way to get there, is to become more agile in terms of your solutions so that they can actually adapt to business change and external change, particularly, obviously, in the current context, that's even more important. And I'll talk a bit later on about how some of these things are coming to the fore. But okay, so this is it's quite a detailed slide. Don't panic. It's just trying to bring to life how I've sort of set out the analysis process for different businesses so far. So we're looking to continually enhance and help our algorithms learn in terms of the psychometrics in online assessments. So we're doing all the setup infrastructure piece on the left-hand side, and then on the right, this is the fairly typical setup for more frequent analysis, where you've got monthly looking at performance and adverse impact. I'll talk a bit more about adverse impact in a second. The quarterly analysis linking directly to job performance. That's sort of really the holy grail of getting to understand how predictive our criteria and assessments are. And then actually, can we sharpen that and make it more relevant and hone the assessment, as well as make everything fairer. And then the final piece is just the annual review and learning, basically, as we go through. So this is the first trend. A lot to cover, but very quickly, that's the way that I'm seeing it come to fruition a bit more. So Vincent, moving on. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So diversity, as you say, we could do the whole webinar on diversity, I imagine, but we are looking at broadening the focus. So gender and ethnicity were the big topics and still are hugely important, but we are looking much broader across diversity now in terms of fairness. So this is all about fairness and giving candidates the same opportunity to show how capable they are in selection. And we see the greater focus now on disability, age, social and economic background, all the protected characteristics. How can we track that data? And how can we really check that the solutions are not discriminating unfairly? So this is really about that second piece of the trend, is tracking adverse impacts, and the concept of adverse impact I'll explain this on the next slide. But the last piece there on the left-hand side about broadening, sorry, skip back, Vincent, could you one slide back, sorry. Sorry, bad instructions. Broadening criteria. So this is about becoming more holistic. Again, aligned to what Peter was saying about being more holistic in your criteria to broaden out the diversity of skills and preferences to help very narrow, limited, elitist definitions. Challenges then. So the main point here is recognizing that bias does exist. It exists at all stages of your selection, but it's about the magnitude of difference between protected groups of people. Data is limited. People are not always disclosing disabilities. There's a number of challenges here, but the vision is about becoming transparent, really recognizing the findings that you're getting from your analysis. If there is a negative impact on women, then you have to call it out. We have to help explore what might be causing that and look for solutions. So that's the main thing for me, is not being afraid of difficult conversations like that, so that we can all tackle it collectively together. Closer collaboration with assessment team and diversity inclusion teams. I'm really seeing that a lot more in terms of the actual tools themselves, but also the branding, the messaging, the positioning, etc. And then, if we skip on to the next slide then, Vincent, sorry. There's a huge amount on this slide, but really, what is adverse impact? I mentioned the term a couple of times. So this is sort of the analysis that we do to understand whether their assessment tools or phases appear neutral, but they may actually be discriminating because of someone's protected characteristics, so gender, ethnicity. So there's lots of different causes, conscious, unconscious bias in assessors or algorithms. And then on the right-hand side, this is a bit of a model I'm not going to go into detail about, but it's what we're really doing with our clients is helping them prevent any negative impact in the first place by a whole range of different inclusive approaches to design, setting up processes to identify negative impact, and then reducing it as well if we spot it. So that's the piece on diversity. And then my last sort of trend was about digitization, which is very well aligned, I think, to everything that the speakers have said so far already. But what I'm really seeing, do we need to?
I think just one short interruption, because I think also this is partly covered by Doris in her next presentation in terms of how these things can be integrated. So I'd like you to focus on the main message you want to send with regards to your digital experiences.
All right, my main message here is about picking technology that supports you rather than getting carried away with any buzz technologies or things like that. So technology, I see it as the enabler of psychology and assessment. And I think the experiences are becoming much more about virtual end-to-end partly because of COVID accelerating it into fully virtual. And what does that really mean to give a sort of candidate experience that is not negatively impacted by technology, but enabled?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's not a objective; it's a means.
Exactly, yeah. It's a means to get to that immersion and collaborative. And this slide here is just it's a mock-up really of what I think we're working towards. So you've got the typical part of this hub screen is the online assessments, but now you can see what I think we're getting towards at some point this year will be final full assessment centres within the virtual environment.
Thank you very much, James. I don't think you can talk any quicker than that.
Yeah, apologies, that was quite a lot, but hopefully some of it went in, so thank you for giving me the time.
No, I think it's very interesting, as well as very important topics. Definitely for some people who may be very interested in any particular field, we can follow up in more detailed and longer conversations. So thanks a lot for now. And we will move on to our last panelist of this webinar, and that's Doris Wang. Last but not least, also with a background in occupational psychology, Doris worked for another international assessment consultancy before she joined Cubics in Hong Kong here as a senior consultant. Right from the start, she was involved in quite a few projects, quite a few graduate selection projects, and much more other projects, by the way, as well. But today she's going to share with us some of her recent projects that she delivered in graduate selection. So, hello, Doris. I think.
Hello, Vincent.
You are. I see the other laptop, and we can hear you. So that's a great start in itself. I think you have quite an intriguing title there. Could you please explain what you mean by building a pyramid of quality in your hiring process?
Yes, sure. So oftentimes we heard our clients talking about this when we ask them what are their requirements for graduate assessment. And please click on the slide. Yeah, so they said they want to ensure a great candidate experience. They want to reduce the time to fill and increase efficiency. And they also want to apply the most objective and valid assessment tools. So sounds familiar? So I came up with this model, I called it pyramid model or the 3E model, as a simple of higher index. Why it's called a pyramid model? Because having an effective process is the foundation. Assessing the candidates against the criteria that determines the success in the job, in other words, the validity of the assessment, not only determines the quality of hire, but also show the candidates that it's a fair selection process. And you can have a very effective process by using many different assessments, but also it will make it a very lengthy process. So not having an effective process is not enough. It should also be a quick and efficient one. And last but not least, having engaging experience and process is important for good candidate experience. As mentioned by the other speakers already, the candidates can easily go to a website like the Glassdoor, and tell other candidates about their experience. So it's very important to manage your employer brand.
Great. Okay. So that explains the title of your case study. So today you will share with us a case study. Could you please share a little bit more about this client?
Yes, sure. So to protect the client's privacy, I cannot tell you their name, but a little bit of their context. So they are a well-known, reputable organization based in Hong Kong in the finance sector, and Cubics has been in partnership with them over the last 5 years already, and we help them assess their graduate candidates for their management trainee program every year. And they want to apply objective and efficient assessment tool to help them identify those top graduates that can fill their future leadership pipeline. And they want to assess their skill set and also their culture and job fit. And one of the key challenges that they have is a high volume of applicants, including overseas applicants. And high volume here actually means compared to how many offers they provide, they have a large number of applications. And the second challenge actually has something to do with a new change for this year's program. So this year, instead of having one management trainee program, they have one for each division. And they have quite a few divisions. And each division has different job nature, so they are looking for a different candidate profile. So as you can see, the below graph shows their selection process. So the first step is the online application, and they only sifted out those candidates who cannot meet their minimum qualifications. And the second step is the online assessments. So the candidates will go through first a value fit questionnaire. And this is a self-selection questionnaire, allowing the candidates to identify to what extent their own values are aligned with the client values. And self-selection meaning that the candidates will receive feedback on the level of fit. So then they can decide whether they want to continue the application or they want to sit themselves out. And alongside the value fit questionnaire, they also go through an aptitude assessment and the personality questionnaire. So from the online assessments, we manage the numbers efficiently. So we sift out a lot of candidates, and the long-listed candidates will go through the next round, which is interviews. So from the interviews, the HR and hiring managers will further explore their language proficiency, their motivation, and also validate the results from the online assessments. And the shortlisted candidates will then go through the final stage, which is the assessment center or an alternative final assessment, depending on the division's request. So there is some customization work involved in the design process. So the value fit questionnaire is entirely a bespoke work based on the client's values and branding. We also map the client's competencies to our personality questionnaire and generated specific job profiles. So the outcome is a clear match score for each candidate. We also advocated the client brand and their tone of voice through branding, the online assessment, and also the candidate feedback to create a very immersive experience.
Right. Okay, so I think it's a very clear process how to get from 2,000 to around 10 to 15 candidates. I think we all know what a personality questionnaire looks like and what an aptitude test looks like, but could you share a little bit more insight into what a values questionnaire could look like?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a pity that I can now share with you the client bespoke one. So here is a demo for a fictitious coffee brand called Bean Central. So as you can see here, it can include an introduction or welcome page to warm up the candidates a little bit and also communicate your brand. And the second graph shows the rating page. So this social media style feed of graphs and phrases make it highly visual and engaging for the candidates. So upon completion, the candidates will immediately see this rich results page, which shows to what extent their own values are aligned with the client's ones. For example, here I have 60% alignment. So this is a strong message saying, look, you shared our values. So research has found value fit can directly predict job satisfaction. So if your employees are happy, they are more likely to stay longer in the organization and also are more likely to be productive. And what else the candidates can get? The final graph shows they also get a profile of their own values. So proceeding the application or not, they are getting something away. And all the information here, every image, every word here is entirely configurable as well. So it's a highly personalized tool.
Okay, that's great. So we are running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to ask you to really focus on the key points that you would like to cover in terms of the outcome of this personalized online solution.
Yes, so you can see we use a combination of these three tools. They can complete it in 15 minutes. So as a result, the client was able to sift out up to 78% of the candidates based on aggregated group reports that we submitted within 48 hours. We also provided 24/7 responsive help desk to support the candidate during the process and also answer any question they may have. And we built a very strong brand for the client. And also the results against the customized job profiles highlighted the key areas that the HR and hiring manager can further explore during their follow-up interviews.
Okay. I think that, by the way, something that you wanted to highlight with regards to this specific version of the cognitive ability test.
Yes. So why we can sift out so many candidates? One of the reasons is because we use this cognitive ability test, which is specifically designed for graduates in this region who tend to have higher cognitive ability. So the level of difficulty is different, so that we can differentiate the candidates better.
Right. Okay. So it's an extra complicated version. You started with your 3E model. Perhaps you can, for every E, highlight one point that you think is quite key to the success of the project.
Yes. So looking at the whole selection process, I summarized these key factors that contribute to making it an effective, efficient, and engaging process. But I just want to highlight two things here, which I think are quite important, but might be easily overlooked. So the first one, as mentioned by other speakers as well, is the multi-criteria online assessments. So having multi-criteria assessment can definitely improve the validity of the assessment process so that you can safely and confidently say is a great hire. Point is about showcasing your values. So instead of having this kind of information on your career website about your values and culture, so the capture, the value fit questionnaire actually provides an interactive and engaging way to showcase your brand and attract those who embrace your company values.
Thank you, Doris, for a great summary of your recent project, and good luck with the upcoming projects as well.
Thank you.
So we have come to the end of our webinar, and I realized where I said at the beginning, sit back and relax. I'm not sure about the relaxing part because there are quite a lot of info thrown at you, so maybe some time to digest. But let me first start with thanking Peter, Anthony, James, and Doris for sharing. Really appreciate your input and time. And it's a coffee chat, it's a webinar, so please also accept our virtual bottles of wine and a box of chocolates for as a token of our appreciation. What we wanted to do today is to give you some food for thought for your next round of graduate selection. I hope you have found something at least interesting and inspiring in this webinar. I knew we had a very ambitious agenda, and that we would probably run out of time. So I'm afraid there's no time now to deal with any of the questions that we have received, but we will do follow up after the webinar with you. And of course, we will also be happy to engage in any follow-up conversations if you have any particular questions or like to just discuss some of these topics in more detail. If you have any additional questions or feedback, you can also reach out to Winnie Chan, winnie.chan@cubix.com, or you can check out our website, www.cubix.com. I think actually in the context of this webinar, there's also an interesting case in the format of a video. It's about Dixon's car phone, where we have implemented a hire solution. Also touching on some of the trends that James has highlighted in his story. So for now, I would like to say thank you again for attending our webinar and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.